Today, we begin an in-depth analysis of a figure whose name is synonymous with elegance, with wealth, and with revolutionary design. Yet her history is, well, it's indelibly marked by ruthlessness and wartime collaboration. We're talking, of course, about Gabrielle Bonnard, Coco Chanel.
We are, and our goal today is to conduct a really rigorous examination of the sources we have in front of us.
Exactly. We need to dissect the creation of this just iconic fashion brand that fundamentally changed what it meant to be a woman in the 20th century.
But then this is the crucial part. We also have to unflinchingly confront the documented dark shadows of her political actions.
Specifically, her role as a German intelligence agent during World War II. We have a pretty complicated stack of research here detailing both her spectacular creative brilliance and the morally compromising choices that defined her path to the top.
It is a profound study in duality, and it really demands precision. I mean, Chanel remains celebrated globally. She's the only fashion designer in history to be included on Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people of the 20th century.
The only one?
Yeah.
That's an incredible statistic.
It is. Her creative influence, spanning everything from the little black dress to this idea of lifestyle branding built around Chanel No. 5, is just unparalleled. But the documents we're analyzing also meticulously detail her actions during the German occupation of France.
And that includes her direct cooperation with high-level German intelligence.
Yes. So we have to rigorously explore this documented complexity, presenting the facts of her political and personal realities right alongside her revolutionary aesthetic contributions.
So the central tension we're really focusing on for you, the listener, is stark. How did a poor, abandoned orphan manage to completely shed her origins, rewrite the rules of feminine style, and build a global empire?
And crucially, what price did she exact?
Or expect others to pay to secure that staggering legacy and, ultimately her immunity from prosecution after the war?
Precisely. We are committed to looking past the popular, almost mythological image of effortless chic and really getting into the documented facts. The facts regarding her financial maneuvering, her political conduct, and the ruthless personal reality hidden behind the facade of, la grande dame of fashion.
So to truly understand the ambition, and I think later the ruthlessness, we have to start where the persona began.
In profound poverty and in intentional obfuscation. Gabrielle Bonnard Chanel was actually born Gabrielle Bonnard Chanel in 1883 in Saumur.
Chanel, with an S. And the sources note that this was actually a spelling mistake in the official registry, a mistake she purposefully never corrected. Why would she keep an error in her name?
Because she wanted to hide her origins. That initial birth record, the one that said Chanel, also indicated she was born in a poorhouse hospice.
Oh.
So correcting the name would mean acknowledging the specific shame of her birth circumstance. Her early life was just defined by tragedy and abandonment. Her mother, Eugénie Jean de Vaux, was a laundrywoman who died when Chanel was only 11 years old.
And her father.
Her father, Albert Chanel, was an itinerant street vendor. The sources are clear. He simply abandoned her and her siblings soon after. Just gone.
So a complete abandonment, which led her to the next formative and equally stark environment, the convent of Aubusson.
She was sent there, yes. It was an orphanage run by the Congregation of the Sacred Heart of Mary, an order founded specifically to care for the poor and rejected children.
So she was quite literally among the rejected.
She was. And she spent 6 years within those walls, living what the sources describe as a stark, frugal life. But the irony here is really powerful. It was within that austere, disciplined setting that she learned the essential trade of sewing.
The trade which would later become the foundation of her entire billion-dollar empire.
Exactly, the one practical skill she took with her.
And it's truly fascinating how that disciplined, frugal environment ironically became a source of design inspiration later on. We'll definitely see that when we discuss her famous villa.
We will. But moving on from Aubusson, she was considered too old for the convent at 18, and she relocated to Moulins. Initially, she worked as a seamstress.
And that's when the shift to the stage happened. This is what gives birth to the name we all recognize.
Right. She needed additional income, so she began singing in a cabaret frequented by cavalry officers, a place called La Rotonde.
And she wasn't the star performer, was she?
No, not at all. Her role was that of a posesse, which is, essentially an intermission performer who entertained the crowd and passed the plate for earnings, often singing kind of risque songs. It was during this phase that she acquired the name Coco.
There are a few competing theories about the name's origin and the sources, and they all tell different stories about her identity at that time.
They do. It might have come from the catchy songs she performed, like Who has seen Coco Kikavu Coco, or maybe Coco Rico?
But there's a more socially charged possibility?
Yes, that it was an allusion to cocotte, which was common French slang for a courtesan or a kept woman.
And this is where we see the first clear, calculated instance of her crafting her own personal narrative, isn't it?
It is absolutely foundational to the mythology of Chanel. When she was already famous, she often later claims the nickname was given to her lovingly and innocently by her father, Albert.
A narrative that's far more respectable than having earned it as a cabaret singer, or worse, as an allusion to a courtesan.
Exactly. This pattern of fabricating details to sanitize her humble or scandalous origins is a constant throughout her life.
She did briefly try to leverage that exposure into a serious stage career, though. In 1906, she traveled to the famous spa resort town of Vichy. She was hoping to find success in its theaters and concert halls.
She tried, but the sources are quite clear that her singing voice was marginal. It lacked the power or the unique quality needed for professional stage work. She just couldn't find employment in the theaters.
So she took an extremely unglamorous job to sustain herself.
Very unglamorous. She worked at the Grand Grill, which was an outdoor mineral water dispensary. She was a denosed doe, literally dispensing glasses of mineral water to the public.
It's such an interesting moment of anti-glamour in her rise, a stark contrast to everything that would come later.
It is. Once the season ended, she went back to Mulan, finally recognizing that stage life was not her destiny. But, and this is the key, she had already made the essential connections, specifically the wealthy patrons, that would launch her into the entirely different, far more lucrative world of fashion.
Right. The transition from struggling cabaret performer to successful couturier wasn't just about design skill.
Not at all. It was entirely financed by her pivotal early relationships. Her initial genius lay in translating that financial security and the access to aristocratic leisure it gave her into a revolutionary functional style.
And the first key enabler was Etienne Bourbon.
Yes. Around age 23, in 1907, Chanel became his mistress, taking the place of another courtesan. She lived a 3-year period of what the sources call a self-indulgent life at his chateau, Royalou. She was just immersed in aristocratic hunting culture and wealth.
And it's there that she began designing hats, almost as a hobby.
Purely as a diversion, more of an artistic outlet than a real business venture at that point. But the truly consequential and financially pivotal relationship was with Captain Arthur Edward Boy Capel.
One of Olson's friends.
Exactly. Starting in 1908, Capel was a wealthy English upper-class member. He served as a political attaché, and critically, he provided the initial capital and the business acumen for her first independent shops in Paris.
And the sources really stress that Capel's influence wasn't just financial.
No, it was aesthetic as well. It's widely suggested that his highly stylized, clean, almost severe sartorial look, the look of the English dandy, influenced the simplified, masculine straight lines that became the foundational early Chanel aesthetic.
Even details of the brand's most famous icon are linked to him.
That's right. The iconic rectangular bottle design for Chanel No. 5 is often attributed to Capel's influence. It was possibly adapted from the clean lines of his Chervet toiletry bottles, or a masculine whiskey decanter he owned that she admired so much.
The shape itself suggests efficiency and clarity. It's such a stark contrast to the overly ornate, flowery perfume bottles of the period.
It's pure modernism.
Their affair lasted for 9 years, and despite Chanel's desire for permanence, Capel was never faithful. He eventually married an English aristocrat in 1918.
But their connection remained profoundly close until his death in a terrible car crash in December 1919. The sources note that Chanel confided she felt she had lost everything when he died. It underscores his role as her mentor, her lover, and her original financier.
And in the meantime, the business was expanding rapidly. This really demonstrates Chanel's sharp business instincts when she had that capital.
It does. In 1910, she became a licensed milliner and opened Chanel Modes at 21 Rue Cambon in Paris, initially selling only those hats she had first designed at Balsan Chateau.
But the rapid expansion into clothing was the crucial next step. In 1913, again financed by Capel, she opened a boutique in Deauville.
A highly fashionable coastal resort. And this location was revolutionary because it was here that she introduced deluxe casual clothing constructed from incredibly humble, low-cost fabrics.
And this is where we first see her audacity, her genius for recontextualizing materials.
Absolutely. She used jersey and tricot materials that were predominantly used for men's underwear or, at best, for very inexpensive items, never high fashion. This allowed her to keep costs down and produce clothes that moved with the body.
And the timing was perfect, right, with this shift toward wartime and post-war practicality.
Perfect timing. She also used a brilliant, highly public form of advertising that circumvented traditional runway shows.
This involved her sister, Antoinette, and her Aunt Adrienne.
Yes, her paternal aunt Adrienne, who was close to her in age, she had them model the new designs daily. They would just parade in her jersey, casual clothes through the fashionable streets and boardwalks of Deauville, normalizing this look of modern, comfortable attire. It was living advertisement.
Her expansion continued, and it was greatly accelerated by the conditions of World War I.
It was. In 1915, she opened a villa boutique in Biarritz, a very strategic placement, near wealthy Spanish clients and European elites who were escaping the fighting in Paris. This venture was a massive financial success.
So successful, in fact, that the sources state that by 1916 she was financially secure enough to fully reimburse Boy Capel's initial investment.
Which solidified her status as an independent businesswoman. She was no longer anyone's kept woman.
And by 1919, she was fully registered couturière, establishing her permanent maison de couture at 31 Rue Cambon. Eventually, she expanded to own 5 properties there, numbers 23 to 31 by 1927.
She had created an empire in under 2 decades, built on a foundation of aristocratic financial backing and, ironically, plebeian fabrics.
But the true engine of that empire, the one that generated decades of bitter legal conflict and almost collapsed her brand during the war, was the fragrance that launched the modern concept of lifestyle branding.
Chanel No. 5. In 1922, seeking to expand into perfume, she met Pierre Wertheimer.
And in 1924, they created Parfums Chanel with Pierre and Paul Wertheimer, who ran the immense bourgeois cosmetics house. The financial split became the stuff of legend and a lot of litigation.
A lot. The Wertheimers received 70% of the profits for providing full financing for production, manufacturing, marketing, and global distribution.
And another partner, Théophile Bader, who owned the large department store Galeries Lafayette, got 20%.
Leaving Chanel with only 10% for licensing her name, she also stepped back from operational control.
From the Wertheimers' perspective, this probably seemed fair. They were taking on massive financial risk, industrializing a product, managing global logistics.
Of course. But for Chanel, this arrangement became a deep, lasting source of resentment. And not just because of the money she made, which was substantial, but because of the control she ceded.
Right. She later referred to Pierre Wertheimer as the bandit who screwed me. It underscores a crucial aspect of her personality. Her desire for total control over the image and output of her brand trumped even financial gain.
She could not tolerate sharing the ownership of something that had her name on it.
Yet, regardless of the internal conflict, the introduction of Chanel No. 5 in 1921 was revolutionary. It extended the designer's influence far beyond clothing and established that modern concept of a designer lifestyle brand.
The simple synthetic scent, the aldehydes, and the minimalist packaging spoke to the same modern aesthetic as her clothing.
And the cultural impact was just undeniable. It set the stage for decades to come. We have that famous anecdote from the 1950s where Marilyn Monroe was asked what she wore to bed.
And she famously stated 5 drops of Chanel No. 5.
Instantly solidifying its status as an iconic product, linked inextricably to modern feminine allure and intimate luxury.
At the same time, Chanel was cementing her place among the highest echelons of European society. She was using these liaisons to further elevate the status of her brand.
She had a romantic interlude with Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich of Russia, who helped introduce her to the French perfume industry through his family connections.
And she financially supported the composer Igor Stravinsky's 1920 ballet's Russ's production of Le Sacre du Printemps.
Her crucial entry into the British elite, though, was facilitated in 1923 by a woman named Vera Bate Lombardi.
Yes, and this connection opened doors to a highly exclusive, powerful circle that included Winston Churchill, Edward Prince of Wales, and most significantly, it led to her 10-year affair with Hugh Richard Arthur Grosvenor, the Duke of Westminster,
Who was universally known as Bendor.
And he was arguably the wealthiest man in England. He showered her with extraordinary gifts, fine jewels, art, a house in London.
And when asked later in life why she never married him, her alleged reply encapsulated her entire self-assured identity. It's a quote, just dripping in calculated self-worth.
There have been several Duchesses of Westminster. There was only one Chanel.
She prioritized her individual legacy over any title.
She did. The Duke also gifted her a parcel of land on the French Riviera in 1927, where she built her highly personalized villa, La Pausa. And fascinatingly, the architect, Robert Streitz, incorporated design elements for the monumental staircase and the patio that were directly inspired by the architecture of the orphanage.
From Aubusine, where she grew up.
From Aubusine. This detail is so striking, it suggests a strange internal integration of her stark, abandoned past into her luxurious, powerful present. It was as if she needed to contain the memory of her origins within the very structure of her wealth.
She also moved intensely bohemian and artistic circles, maintaining a long, complicated friendship with the society figure Mise Assert. But the glamour came at a cost.
A heavy one. The sources indicate that by 1935, Chanel had developed a daily morphine habit, which she maintained until her death.
This is a truly dark and complex detail, hidden behind the glittering facade of the Duke's generosity and her constant work. It suggests an incredible internal pressure.
It does. It raises the question of what the personal cost of being the only one Chanel truly was. It forces us to recognize the intense, possibly destructive complexity beneath the surface of her glamorous public life.
Before we delve into the wartime shadows, we absolutely must fully appreciate the profound scale of her aesthetic shift. Post-World War I, Chanel literally changed how women dressed and moved. And in doing so, she changed the social rules.
Her aesthetic was defined by youthful ease, liberated physicality, and unencumbered sportive confidence. The sources all agree she dealt the official death blow to the corseted female silhouette.
A change that was both social and economic.
It was. She systematically borrowed functionality from male attire, often inspired by nautical and equestrian culture, which she was exposed to through Balsan and Capo. Think of the simplicity of striped shirts, bell-bottom pants, crewneck sweaters, espadrilles.
Things traditionally worn by sailors and fishermen, now adopted by high society.
Exactly. Her initial and foundational design triumph was her innovative use of jersey fabric, a machine knit material that had previously been considered too coarse for high fashion.
The sources note she initially purchased it because of its low cost and abundance, especially during wartime shortages, but it proved to be the perfect material for a new, modern era.
Absolutely. Traditional couture materials were scarce, and critically, women were entering the workforce in unprecedented numbers. As nurses, civil servants, factory workers, they needed practicality and ease of movement.
So her suede jersey suits and dresses allowed for the free and easy movement required to commute on buses and bicycles to perform physical tasks.
They were designed to be put on without the help of servants, which signals a dramatic shift toward independent, self-reliant womanhood. This wasn't just fashion, it was a response to the great social restructuring of the era.
That concept of practical luxury really culminated in the most enduring symbol of the brand, the Chanel suit.
First introduced around 1923, it was explicitly designed for comfort, using supple, light tweed or boucle, often chosen for its texture and resilience.
And the construction details are so meticulous and functional. The jacket, for instance, had no stiffness, minimal structure, and it featured functional patch pockets.
Which was a revolutionary addition.
Yeah.
It allowed women to carry their own essentials without relying on a bulky purse. The jacket was cut straight, without bust darts, ensuring quick and easy movement.
There's also that hidden detail that demonstrates this functional obsession. The sources mention a thin, gold-plated chain was often sewn into the jacket's hemline.
Right, to add just enough weight to ensure the garment hung perfectly and remained stable, preventing it from riding up when the wearer moved.
And the fittings themselves were an integral part of the design process.
They were. Models were reportedly required to perform functional movements, climbing the stairs of an imaginary bus, bending as if getting into a low-slung sports car to ensure complete freedom of movement.
The suit was practicality disguised as luxury, a uniform of modern corporate elegance.
And beyond the suit, the other foundational piece is, of course, the little black dress, the LBD.
She famously vowed to dress all women in black, liberating the color from its traditional association with mourning and presenting it as a statement of universal, democratic elegance.
Vogue, in 1926, published an illustration of her simple black silk crepe dress. They dubbed it the garçon look, the flapper style, and famously compared its basic, ubiquitous lines to the ubiquitous Ford automobile.
Just as the Model T had made cars accessible, The LBD made high style accessible.
And this was revolutionary because during the lead up to and during the Great Depression era of the 1930s, this affordable chic allowed the non-wealthy to walk around like millionaires.
By using black, she erased the visual distinction between the demi-monde, the socially marginal, and high society.
She proclaimed, "I impose black, it's still going strong today, for black wipes out everything else around." It was a bold claim.
Her innovations extended powerfully to accessories too, particularly jewelry.
Yes, she famously broke down the barriers between costume and fine jewels, insisting on mixing them freely. She found displaying only fine jewels disgusting. She felt it was too ostentatious.
She preferred fake jewelry because it's provocative.
And she launched a hugely successful line with Duke Fulco di Verdura, featuring the iconic jeweled Maltese crosscuff. This allowed wealthy clients to impress others with aesthetics and style without displaying their costly fine jewelry in public.
So she cemented costume jewelry as a coveted, fashionable accessory in its own right, not merely a cheap substitute.
Exactly. And finally, the iconic Chanel bag, the 2.55. She introduced a version with a thin shoulder strap in 1929, inspired by soldiers' functional bags, and updated it significantly in February 1955.
And the design, much like her villa, carried subtle but powerful references to her childhood.
It did. The quilted exterior, for instance, was influenced by the protective jackets worn by jockeys, connecting back to her equestrian days with Balsan.
And the burgundy lining referenced the uniforms worn at the convent of Aubazine.
And most pointedly, the chain strap, which allowed hands-free carrying, echoed the chatelaines' long chains used to carry keys and thimbles worn by the orphanage caretakers she remembered from her youth.
So every functional detail had a hidden biographical meaning.
It did. We should also quickly note the profound cultural shift she championed regarding suntans. While on the Duke of Westminster's yacht in 1923, she accidentally got sunburned and simply rolled with it, normalizing the tan publicly.
Right. Previously, milky skin had traditionally denoted aristocracy, those who did not need to work outdoors.
And Chanel turned the tan into a new status symbol, denoting a life of privilege, of yachting, and of leisure.
So now we must transition to the period where her public actions and political life diverged most sharply from her design legacy, the late 1930s and World War II.
Her couture house was a lucrative business, employing approximately 4,000 people by 1935. But when war broke out in 1939, she made the controversial decision to close her shops.
Her official reason, the one that was widely publicized, was that it was not a time for fashion.
But certain biographers suggest a far more ruthless and personal motive. This action resulted in 4,000 female employees losing their jobs.
And it may have been an act of calculated retaliation against the workers who had participated in the general labor strikes for better conditions in 1936.
So this suggests her ruthlessness extended beyond her romantic life into labor relations. It's a very harsh move.
During the German occupation, Chanel took up residence at the ultra-exclusive Hotel Ritz in Paris,
which was the preferred headquarters for high-ranking German military staff and collaborationist French officials. It was here, in this intensely political and morally compromised environment, that she began a romantic liaison with Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage.
And Dinklage was not just a civilian lover.
No, he was a German aristocrat, a diplomat, and, crucially, a highly placed military intelligence operative working for the Abwehr German military intelligence. Living with a high-ranking German officer at the Ritz solidified her proximity to the occupation command structure.
This brings us back to the Wertheimers and the massive financial battle over Parfums Chanel. The war provided Chanel with a political opportunity she could not ignore.
Identifying as an Aryan under Nazi law, she saw the seizure of Jewish-owned property and businesses, the Aryanization policies, as a chance to finally gain the total control of her company that she had craved since 1924.
The sources confirmed the ruthlessness of her pursuit. In May 1941, she formally wrote to German officials claiming the company was legally abandoned by its Jewish owners.
The Wertheimers had fled France, so she demanded sole ownership. She cynically used her name to demand reparations for the prejudices I have suffered in the course of these 17 years regarding the financial split.
She was attempting to exploit a horrific, state-sanctioned injustice for her own financial gain.
She was. However, the Wertheimers, who were extremely astute, had anticipated Nazi mandates. They anticipated the Aryanization laws, and they had legally and preemptively transferred control of Parfums Chanel in May 1940 to Félix Amiot,
A Christian French businessman and a close friend.
Yes, and he was legally obligated to return the company to them at the war's end.
So her plot failed during the war.
Yeah.
But the legal battle continued intensely afterwards.
It did. Chanel hired René de Chambrun, who was the son-in-law of Pierre Laval, the highly controversial former prime minister of the Vichy collaborationist regime, to sue the Wertheimers yet again.
That association alone highlights the deep political toxicity of her post-war maneuvers.
The Wertheimers realized that publicizing Chanel's Nazi affiliations, the details of Agent F7124 and her political missions, could fatally damage the highly profitable Chanel brand globally. So they sought an accommodation.
A settlement.
A massive financial trade-off. The resulting deal in 1947 was truly extraordinary.
They renegotiated the 1924 contract, granting Chanel wartime profits equivalent to a staggering $12 million in 2022 valuation.
Furthermore, she received 2% of all future Chanel No. 5 sales worldwide, a royalty stream that guaranteed her immense wealth for life, and in an unusual stipulation, the Wertheimers agreed to pay all her personal living expenses for the rest of her life,
which secured her existence at the Ritz.
This financial settlement effectively bought the silence and security that ensured her creative legacy, rather than her political choices, would define her.
But the sources reveal much more dangerous activities than just financial opportunism.
Much more. Declassified French police documents identified her not just as a collaborator, but specifically as a suspect, and German agent F7124, pseudonym Westminster.
This links her directly and officially to German intelligence operations. We need to underscore the gravity of this official designation.
We do. Biographer Hal Vaughn's research further suggests she committed to the German cause by 1941 and worked for General Walter Schellenberg, chief of the SD.
The FD was the Sicherheitsdienst, the security service. It was the SS intelligence wing. This association places her collaboration at the highest, most ideologically driven level of the Nazi apparatus.
And the moral weight of that is significant. After the war, Schellenberg was captured and later convicted of war crimes at the Nuremberg trials.
Yet the sources confirm that Chanel financially supported Schellenberg's family, paid for his medical care, and even paid for his funeral after his death in 1952.
Her unwavering support for a convicted war criminal is a chilling testament to her political allegiance. We must acknowledge the profound injustice and suffering caused by collaboration and war crimes actions from which she sought to personally benefit.
Her most prominent documented mission was codenamed Operation Modellet.
Operation Model Hat, a scheme devised by Chanel and Schellenberg in late 1943 or early 1944. The sources confirm Schellenberg had a known weakness for unconventional, often fantastical, intelligence schemes.
And this was certainly unconventional.
The premise relied entirely on her social connections. The goal was for Chanel, leveraging her pre-war friendship with Winston Churchill, dating back to her time with the Duke of Westminster, to act as a messenger from Hitler's foreign intelligence.
The objective was to persuade Churchill to negotiate a separate peace with the Germans through a secret channel.
To carry out this plan, they recruited Vera Bate Lombardi, the same woman who had introduced Chanel to the British elite decades earlier, as a courier.
Lombardi was reportedly unaware of the full machinations, of the true political nature of the mission. She traveled to Madrid to deliver a letter from Chanel to Churchill via the British Embassy.
But the mission completely collapsed in spectacular fashion. Upon arrival in Madrid, Lombardi, whether through genuine patriotism or fear, proceeded to denounce Chanel and others to the British Embassy as Nazi spies.
This direct evidence of her involvement in a high-stakes political operation aimed at influencing the Allies is critical proof of her collaboration.
It's damning evidence.
And yet, despite this overwhelming evidence, after the French liberation in 1944, Chanel was briefly interrogated by the Free French Purge Committee, the Epuration.
The Provisional Government's commission established to cleanse the country of collaborators.
And she was released. Due to a stated lack of documented evidence, she immediately fled to Switzerland to avoid further charges.
It's a remarkable escape from justice. Before fleeing in a final, audacious public relations maneuver, she left a note in her store window offering free bottles of Chanel No. 5 to all arriving American GIs.
The question of her immunity is really central to her historical narrative. Chanel's grandniece claimed Chanel said, "Churchill had me freed."
And historical speculation is rife that Churchill intervened to protect her. The theory suggests that forcing Chanel to testify might have exposed the pro-Nazi sympathies of certain high-level British officials, society elites, or even members of the royal family.
Which would have been politically devastating for the Allies at that moment.
Exactly. The sources confirm this was a massive subject of contemporary gossip and speculation. A 1949 investigation saw Chanel deny all accusations and offer a character reference from Duff Cooper, the British ambassador, which strengthened the widely held belief of high-level protection.
We do have to address the conflicting accounts that emerged much later. A purported French resistance membership card for the Eric network belonging to Chanel was recently found.
It was. However, a historian disputes the evidence, noting the card was issued in 1957, years after the war, and lacked supporting witness evidence of any meaningful resistance work. The overwhelming historical documentation points to her status as Agent F7124.
So, regardless of that later disputed claim, the facts regarding her core conduct remain clear from the declassified documents.
They do. She ruthlessly used her Aryan status to attempt to seize Jewish-owned assets. She worked as an agent for high-level German military intelligence, and the sources document that she harbored a vicious antipathy toward Jews, intensified by the anti-Semitic views of her high society associates, including the Duke of Westminster.
This history is inescapable, and we have to acknowledge the profound injustice felt by victims of collaboration that she never faced charges for her documented actions.
Never. Following her escape, Chanel lived in Switzerland for several years, partly with von Dinklage, before deciding to make one of the most audacious comebacks in the history of fashion.
She sold her famous Villa La Pausa in 1953 and returned to Paris.
Her motivation for relaunching her couture house at over 70 years old was clearly fueled by intense dissatisfaction with the post-war aesthetic championed by male designers like Christian Dior.
She famously scorned the new look, calling its aesthetic illogical and repressive. She cited the waist cinchers, patent bras, heavy skirts, and stiffened jackets as a return to the corseted female silhouette she had spent her career trying to destroy.
She was determined to re-enter the fashion world and liberate women all over again.
And in one of the great historical ironies, her comeback in 1954 was fully financed by Pierre Wertheimer,
the very man she had battled and attempted to seize assets from during the war. Their relationship was financially productive, even if deeply complicated personally, illustrating the dominance of business interests over wartime animosity.
The initial reception was highly divided. The French press was cautious, even hostile, primarily due to the undeniable controversies surrounding her wartime collaboration.
But the American and British press hailed it as a genuine breakthrough, focusing on the return of practical chic.
Bettina Ballard, the influential editor of American Vogue, was a powerful advocate.
Very powerful. She promoted the new collection heavily, featuring the model Marie-Helene Arnault wearing a navy jersey mid-calf suit. This exposure led to an immediate influx of crucial orders from the U.S.,
which essentially salvaged her reputation and career revival. It demonstrates the American market's power to redefine a European legacy.
It does. In her final years, she became increasingly tyrannical and famously demanding of her staff. Though she maintained a few close friendships, including with the dancers Jacques Chazot and the socialite Aimé de Hiren, with whom she often strolled through central Paris.
She remained an intensely private and ultimately a lonely figure.
Very lonely. She died on January 10, 1971, aged 87, at the Hotel Ritz, the place she had resided for over 30 years, both during the German occupation and in her final decades of wealth.
Her final words, starkly simple, were reportedly to her maid. "You see, this is how you die."
Her funeral was attended by numerous luminaries from the art and fashion world, including Salvador Dali and Yves Saint Laurent, with her models occupying the first seats.
However, the planned Heroes Tribute, organized by the then First Lady of France, Claude Pompidou, was quickly curtailed.
It was. French intelligence agencies released damaging documents outlining her extensive wartime involvements. Her death brought a final public confrontation with the shadow she had spent decades trying to suppress.
So ultimately, the complex portrait we have drawn today reveals a genius rooted in functional adaptation.
Chanel's brilliance lay in taking functional, practical fabrics like jersey, previously used for underwear, and comfortable utilitarian forms like the little black dress and the practical suit, to create a sense of practical luxury, confidence, and freedom for women. This was a true creative revolution.
But the sources undeniably reveal that her ambition was unbound by typical moral constraints.
Her willingness to engage in high-level collaboration for personal financial gain, attempting to seize Jewish-owned assets, and supporting a convicted war criminal, all these actions are an indelible part of her documented story.
And the sources indicate that her reported anti-Semitism was sharpened and encouraged by her high society associations, especially the Duke of Westminster, who was an established anti-Semite. Considering the immense enduring influence she holds over global fashion and culture, we are left with a significant question. How should we reconcile the brilliance of her creative legacy, the undeniable liberation she offered women through design, with the darkness of her documented political alliances? What responsibility do figures of cultural prominence have for the moral dimension of their private and political actions, particularly when those actions caused immense harm?
A question without an easy answer.
Thanks for listening.